And so internet comes along and white nerds are suddenly made aware of all these other nerd communities. So the theory I'm working with is for a long time before we had the internet, nerd communities existed kind of independently and unaware of each other's presence. Specifically, the white nerd community was insular, right? And they were because they had to keep out people that were going to marginalize them, right? And so they were really kind of an insulary community where you had to prove who you were to gain access to that community because they were so used to getting bullied or whatnot or out, being the outcast or whatnot. And so a lot of these white nerd communities kind of built themselves, and they thought that because there were no other black people, or the black nerds or brown nerds or female nerds they ran into were so few and far between, that they thought that they were the only group of nerds out there. And what they didn't understand was there were nerd communities that weren't white, that weren't male, that weren't straight, that were forming in their own little bubbles. And they were fully aware of these white nerds over here, but since they can't really access and hang out with them because of a lot of weird um, racism, which seems to be a byproduct of nerd. I don't understand it, but they couldn't necessarily interact with this white nerd group. So we're fully aware, like black nerds are fully aware of white nerds. Like we are fully aware of them. But we knew that we couldn't be around them because it always got weird and racist, like at the strangest times. Um, and so we had our own nerd communities that we shared our stuff and our loves. And so I know a lot of Black Star Wars nerds, and I grew up with a lot of Black Star Wars nerds. It wasn't It wasn't like just a white thing. I grew up with hell, I grew up with black folks that like Mystery Science Theater just like I did. Okay. And so there weren't the gang of us, but there was a group of us that knew about it. And so I think what happened was white nerds kind of assumed that because they didn't see nerds they just assumed that being a nerd was a white thing. And so internet comes along and white nerds are suddenly made aware of all these other nerd communities. And instead of assuming, oh, well, these nerd communities have the same amount of skin in the game as we do, they've been doing the nerd thing for as long as we have. The assumption is, well, that group of girl nerds over there they're just nerds because they think it's cool. Group of black nerds over there, they're just nerds because they think it's cool because it's trendy. We're the real OGs. They're all pretenders. And that's what happened.